Right. In today's session, I'm going to talk about uh, XML. We call it extended markup language, which is again very useful to store structured data. So in this session, I'm going to explain how XML is used in various applications and also XML basics, and how you may query XML documents, as well as a little bit about the XML databases. Although this is not sometimes used everyday applications, but some places where you will find that this is very uh, useful to know XML syntax. Uh, so let's start. So if you start with explaining what XML is and what it is used compared to languages like HTML, you know, if you take HTML, we have a preset tag set. That means they are fixed. We have to make, we have to choose from the available tags. But XML, for example, we can actually use to, our own way, meaning like we can create our own set of tags. So therefore, usually XML, we say it's designed to be the self-descriptive nature. And also it comes with as a subset of standard generalized markup language, which is very important and used in other languages as well. So this set can be used to create even the other markup languages, right? So first, let's look at how XML languages are used in the web. So if you look at like the other different types of, tag-based languages. So XML is used within these. So there are various XML-based languages. Starting from XHTML, this was like right now the recent one, HTML version 5, for example. Before that, we had something called XHTML, which is called the strict version of XML or HTML, which means that for validation purposes, it was very easy and quite useful. RSS, for example, you can use it in to share the data, and also like it was very popular in feed readers, so we call it RSS feed readers. Then MathML, which is used to describe mathematical notation, especially in web interface, if you want to have very complex mathematical notation. So there was another language called LaTeX, which is used in scientific documents. Similar to that, we could define using XML based. It was XML based language. Then even this is applied for images. In SVG is we use to explain what we call the images, especially in the graphical images. We could use this. That means mostly vector images, not the raster images. You know, there are two types of images we can talk about: pixel based and geometrical shape based. So SVG is used to describe images like logos, for example. Then KML, we call keyhole markup language, which is used to exchange geographical information, especially in Google Maps, and most popular, there was application most popular like Google Earth, where you can find locations in the world map, which was very familiar, which was based in XML. Right, let's give you some examples. We are not going to go into details here, but just to give you some examples, what we see, starting from math version. So this is, I told you, like is used for representing mathematical equations. So two sides, I am actually explaining the LaTeX, which is again, I told you, like we use for scientific documents, and some of you have all may have already used this, which is very important in some cases. This was initially like it was very difficult for us to come up with the equations in Word kind of a documents, but now it is supported. But even then, still this is popular in creating, uh, mathematical documents. So people, especially in scientific community, extensively use LaTeX. And what you have seen here is actually outcome of LaTeX document. Right. The same thing, if you are going to implement in MathCal, it's given the other side, which I'm not going to explain right now, but you can search for more details, which is again, you can see there are key, tags we will define under this. For example, math tag, you can notice it here, as well as m fraction, m square root, like how exactly you need to represent each part of the equation. Right. So then comes the graphical version. So here is that actually I have taken this from one of the popular books on HTML or developing web, where they explain about how to generate simple SVG. And you can see here, it's again like a code, which is very useful to generate images. Like for example, nowadays we are using a lot of AI tools, which again, if you want to generate images, yes, you can use a prompt, but still, if you're using tag-based, it's easier for you to make changes. So this is a one place where you can actually take advantage of. So in this particular case, for example, it describes shapes like rectangle, a circle, and even the parts. And also you can provide colors. You can have solid colors like the green background. And then you have shadings we call gradients, which you can see in the circle, right? Which gives you a feeling like a sphere, the 3D version of this, right? And then also you can have text. Right, then the next application, as you can see in Google Earth applications, or even when you're placing a tag, even places like Google Maps, for example, this could be used to explain the information like the places. So we can describe location details. You can have, for example, name for a location, and then you can describe, and or even you can provide, coordinates. So the code, you can see if you carefully look at, there are tags called place mark and name, or the description and coordinate. So which is very useful. So I hope you understood the importance of XML and how it is used in various applications. So if you look at a simple example given here, we will have several XML elements. For example, this particular piece of code, we have several elements we call nodes. And then the elements can contain other elements. And then also you can have text content, and then you can have something called attributes. So structure you can see here. So you can see the bigger one, or the root element here is course. Within that you can find lecturer, and then you can have name, university, phone, this information. And this could be even dynamic as well. It's not restricted, although it's structured. Right. So let's start looking at the basics. So which I think now you might notice that it's very important to know how this is used. So in the different colors, actually, I have represent the starting tag, and then usually you have end tag. Most of the time you have start and end, most of the cases, but there are some cases that you can have single element. And for example, if you focus on email, for example, it will be ended like this fashion, which we call self-closing tag. And then with the tag, you can have what we call the text content. For example, the lecturer's name is put it in different color here. Like in my case, in my name, Sampath is here under name, and then the university and also the phone number, right? So those are text content. Other than that, you can actually have more information as attributes. So for example, so the phone, we can say the type, and then you can say the phone number is given in the international format. So this is the information actually we have represented here. Right. So with that, we can talk about having a kind of a tree structure, because it's very important that you will understand this. As I told you earlier, we will see the course as a parent tag. And if you specify course as a parent tag, then the lecturer will be the child tag, right? And then, for example, now under the lecturer, we can have three other tags like name, university, and phone, which is we can note, these nodes are known as siblings, right? So understanding the pre-structure is also important when you want to analyze, especially when you want to, store data as a structured form like this, and when you want to analyze or query based on XML, understanding XML tree is very important. So you can see it'll uh, um, it's a clear structure which you can have different piece of information. So this structure will help the computer to understand how we actually organize the information. Right. Next one. There are various viewers that you can actually use. If you ask me like how to view, most of the browsers actually supports the any, you can say modern browsers can display XML file. And there are some online tools. I actually put only two. There could be many or similar viewers. So you can have a look at it. So I have put some, viewers. If you want to see the code that I have given you, you can just copy and see the outcome of the XML. So it's very interesting. I mean, as a beginner, you might understand. So until you understand the XML completely, you can just copy and paste and see how it actually renders your. Okay, so let's move on. So I told you like in our relational databases, so XML could be used as well formatted, XML. So I'm going to talk about how we can, put it in that way. So starting from XML syntax. So one thing you need to understand is you have to have a one root element. So remember, we have seen a tree structure, that's the idea. So your root node is the root element. So in this particular case, you can see in this piece of code, the lecturer is the root element. So depending on how you actually formatted it, you should be able to understand the root element. And in this particular case, the lecturer is the root element. So then usually the very first line of any uh, what we call a page, even in HTML, you have this line we call prologue. Um, so that means describe various things like the version of the XML that we are using, and also whether we are supporting Unicode. For example, in this case, we say encoding is UTF-8, which is very important to understand. Right. So again, continuation of the syntax. You can see that most of the time I told you you have a closing tag, but then again, there are cases where you don't have, which we call self-closing tag. And remember, these tags are case sensitive. So usually lowercase is preferred, but then you can actually have a mix of cases. For example, if you look at the KML format, which is used in Google Earth and so on, they have actually used mixed case. Right. Then another important one is like when you're using this. Right. Um, Sorry about that. So if you look at the XML syntax, it should be properly formatted, which means the starting and end tag, especially when you mix it, it should be matched. For example, in this particular case, you see the tags we use to represent in bold, like B and italics for I. So let's say you are going to have both bold and italics text. If you start with bold and italics, then you have to end italic first and then the bold. Right? And not only that, in some cases, when you're providing attribute values, like in this particular case, I told you like font type is international. That value should be always quoted. So it's very important. If you missed, then might not properly visualize in case if you're trying to visualize, or if you are querying, that might be another issue. Right. Then these angle brackets that we have used is, that uh, it we use for representing tag. So in that particular case, if you want to use this symbol within the tag, then you have to represent in special way. Can This is the same for even for HTML as well. So it's even here. If you want to represent special characters, so these should be formatted in this manner since they are actually used as a part of uh, the tag representation, right? So this is very important that you adhere to these rules. Comments, you can see it's same as comments in HTML, same format is actually used. Okay, so I hope you got basic understanding about how we develop the XML file. So let's have a small group work. I want each and every one of you to create a small XML code. You don't have to send me the file, but you can save it. But create a small code which represent personal information of a person. It you can think about a person and provide. You don't have to have real information. But I want to see the structure, right? Shall we take around like 5 minutes? And then those who finish, please share your answers in the chat. So this is Ishan's submission. So the first line we got prologue, which is optional, but it's better to have them. And then the root element here is person. And within that, you have personal details, contact info, and then education, employment. Okay, so it's well structured. Okay, thanks for sharing your answer. So let's move on then. The next thing that I would like to discuss about what we call the namespaces. Now let's see if you have an application where sometimes we have to work with multiple applications. And if you have like similar tags are used, for example, left-hand side, you have HTML document and we have a HTML. If you are using both, notice that the title tag is common to both. And this is confusing, right? For example, if you are going to have multiple documents with the same tag. So therefore, we need requirements when you have a conflicting tags, especially when you want to mix multiple XML documents or when you're going to use multiple different applications. So therefore, what we do usually, we use what we call namespaces. So namespaces means you are going to use some special label for that. For example, here you can notice now we have used different special label here. So for example, here we say C, for example, in this particular case, we represent course related tags. And we have X here, which is to represent HTML related tags. So this is very, very important. Like if you want to avoid any conflicts. Right, let's move on. In this particular case, what we need to explain is use of uniform resource identifier, which is we need to identify the internet resource. Right, in this particular case, for example, in web address, we call URL. For example, if you take Terademia, we can have www.pdn.ac.lk, which is address, right? The other one is unique identifier for resource, which we call URL, which you can have, for example, like a ISBN number, which we can use, right? So these are quite useful when we need to look at a unique identification, right? Especially we want to represent unique information. So when you want to specify URI, right? So for example, in this particular case, we are using a special attribute for this. When you want to specify URIs, so we use what we call XMLNS, this attribute to define each of these namespaces. So you can see here there are two places. Now the HTML, this set we were discussing about the conflicting we use to define HTML, and this is what we call the URI we use, right? And then in this one, it's actually we written in XML, and you can look at URL, but it's not a URL or you are representing a particular place. So there's no something like that, but it's just used for the identifications. So it's very important you understand. So here the C, the prefix that we have used it here, the elements of these courses, the representations, these courses are related to units to pyramid. And here, this is a standard. And in this particular case, X, you can see here, X is related to elements related to HTML. So that's how you should understand use of URIs. Very important that sometimes you include this information as well. So you can refer what we have seen in previous documents as well. Right. So let's see sometimes how do you represent this in two separate namespaces instead of putting it separate like in separately. So you can actually combine and put them. So you can see here we have course, that is the top element in this particular case. And then within that, you put the two namespaces for the label C and also for label X. We can actually put them together, right? Then we can have what we call the default namespaces. Now, when you talk about the default namespaces, in this particular case, we can say it's a regular namespace. So you don't have to specify any prefix, right? So for example, the course, we didn't specify C here, notice that, but for HTML, we specify X here. So which means we consider this course related tags coming from default namespace. So which means, you know, that when you're adding prefixes is sometimes tedious task, you know, putting both C and X to each of the tags. So instead of that, here you can notice that you decided to use the course related one as a regular namespace so that you don't have to put a label there. But for the second one, you specify a label. Right. Next group work. So I think you have worked out the personal information previously. And let's think about personal information from two different departments, right? So now what might happen, like, for example, if you compare like your answers, if you compare your answer with your friend's answer, and if you are thinking of putting these two documents in the same place, that will create a confusion. So which means to resolve this, we have to use namespaces. So thinking in that, so you have created a one document for representing a person, create another document which represent a person, which you might have some tags similar. Then introduce the namespace so that now you are going to avoid the conflicts. So that's a simple group work. Again, I will give you 5 minutes and I would like to have your answers in the chat. So you can see that namespace are indicated here. So our root element is company under that. So we have two namespaces. We have HR and sales, right? And the URI also information given here, which we say it's related to the same place, but it indicates the two different departments. And you can see that, you know, both cases you have names and you have the same set. Okay, remember that this could be different, right? Doesn't necessarily have to be the same. So for example, HR might have like 3 tags and then sales might have 4 tags. It's perfectly all right. But what we need is we need to minimize the conflicts, right? But assuming that you are putting into single document, and if you are going to put it a structure, then this would be fine, because the next slide, what I'm going to discuss is the structure of the document. Right, the next one. This answer is from Wikamaji. Again, thanks for sharing your answer. So as you can see here, again, we in his case, you have put it as department 1 and department 2. And then you can have, okay, this one is slightly different, which okay, it says name. Okay, this is not what I expected, but I understand your point. Um, one suggestion would be like, if you put in that way, it's like that John Doe is assigned for 2 departments, which what I didn't expect. It's like there are 2 departments under this. So maybe he wants to represent he's working for 2 departments. I don't know. I mean, that might be a little bit confusing, I guess. But yeah, I can't complain. But overall, the structure is okay. And I think you have correctly used the namespaces, right? Okay. So anyway, thanks a lot for sharing your answer. Let me discuss the next part, which means like, as you can see, when you're defining, let's say now 2 persons given me 2 documents and you have different structures. So sometimes we have to say, when you're developing documents, there should be a structure. So the next thing that I would like to discuss about the XML schemas. In XML schema, we can describe the structure of the document, and also like you can define what elements you want to have in a document, what attributes you can have, and also you can define, I told you, like you have a root and the child, or parent or child. So you can define what are the child elements, what is the order of the child elements, the number of child elements, whether the element is empty or whether it can have some text, and also you can have some default and fixed values. So under that, I'm going to talk about 2 things, document type definition DTT, which is a method of, or we can define a set of rules which we can use to define the structure, right? And the second one, what we have XSD, it's a newer one compared to the DTT. Again, to define the structure of the rules for the XML document. So let's start with the document data type. So when you talk about the document data type, it can be used to define a set of rules, which we can use to define the structure and what is allowed, right? And the purpose of using DTT is each element structure and its attributes. And also, this could be used to ensure the documents created by different portals. So let's look at an example. Now you can see here, I'm defining lecturer, and under the lecturer, I have 3 elements. We have name, unit, and form. Now let's say that you need to, have the consistency. That means when you want to define lecturer, again, you have to have the same format. So in DTT, we can define it like this. So for example, in this particular case, we are defining that, okay, the lecturer is our root. And then under the lecturer, we can have three um, child elements. So we will say name, university, and phone are the child elements that we would like to have. So that means you must have name, university, and phone, right? And then this hash PC data represent that you have text data. It's called past character data. So which means the name, university, and phone, right? All you have text data. So that's what it means. Okay, let's move to the next one. So as you can see in the first one, that is the header. And then we have element. With this one, we can say lecture is an element and which contains the name, university, and phone numbers. And we have text data. And then, for example, if you have this, let's say you can have email. So in this particular case, we didn't have email. Let's say we have an email, but that could be empty. So that is also we could define this, right? But then let's say you want to allow multiple elements, then we can use plus here. Now this plus indicates that it's allowed multiple lecture elements. So that means you can have more than one lecturer, right? In this case, you can have more than one lecture. Then you can have question marks. So for example, this question mark is used to say that the phone and email elements are optional, right? So we can use various different symbols. So for example, vertical bar, we can say in element, dash, specified, you can sequence, dot, and then you have a question mark to say that it's optional, plus you can see at least one you have to have, but you can have a star to say that you can have zero more, like in regular expression. Then the next one, you can declare the attributes. In this particular case, we have this is represented as attribute list. So usually you have an element name, then attribute name, and your type specification. So let's look at one example. So in this particular case, we have attribute list, form, type, CD data, and we have a hash implied. So which means you will say phone element can have an optional attribute type, right? That contain text. At the same time, if you look at like use of vertical bar. So for example, next one. So we have attribute list, phone type, local. This vertical bar means optional, or you can have local or international. And you can see it's required. So which means the type of attribute, either local or international, is required information. Right. So the specification you can have required, implied, fixed, which means you have a fixed specific value, or you can have default value. Right. Now, how do you validate? Now, the next question is now you perform or you create the set of rules, and then you have a document. So you need to have to validate your documents according, that means the documents that prepare, whether they follows the structure. So we need some tools which we can use. So try visiting this one. Let me show you. it's called code defined in XML. Right. So hope you can see here, right? So you can, so this one actually you can use for various things. The common one is, I think most of you are familiar with the JSON format, which you can use to validate. Beautify means nicely arranging this one. So this tool could be used. Right. Okay, let's move on. One example, you can see this example where we have the DTP information, where we say our root element is course, and course can have a lecturer, name, university, and phone. And then within that, we will say that all this information contains text data, right? And we will have this information, right? So we could, check, put in this. So let's copy this and then try whether it will validate, right? So that also you can put. So here is another example where I also included the attribute information. Again, in this one, you can see we have a course. Course can have lecturer name, university phone, and email. Lecturer is text, name is text, university is text, phone is text. And then the attribute list type is again uh, text implied, and then email, you might not have any information. So for example, hide, that could be implied. So meaning that you have put the information here, right? So try these two. Another example. So I'm going to give you or share my slides. So try validating this. Friday's session, I'm going to take this week, where I will explain more on validation. Right. That's all what we are going to discuss for today. And I will share all my slides and the video recording in the latest page. Thank you.